everybody, welcome back to the Contrarians. We have a special guest with us today, and it's kind of a special topic today. So in the past, if you follow the Contrarians at all, you'll know that we're a channel where we love just talking about music. We love talking about hard rock, heavy metal, all kinds of genres of music. But we have done episodes before on heavy metal bands. One of the episodes that we've done previously is Black Sabbath. On our show, one of us is usually in the hot seat where we're defending or championing an album that typically isn't seen as that band's best album. We've done Black Sabbath in the past. Martin Popoff was in the hot seat and he chose Sabotage as his favorite or the best Black Sabbath album. We're going to kind of zero in on the Dio years in this episode because I've kind of more recently been a little contrarian on the Dio albums, where lately I've been going more to the Dehumanizer album. And today we have a special guest, Dawn. She's joining me today, and she's going to be kind of like the sober position where she's going to be telling me why I'm wrong and why maybe Heaven and Hell is the best or what's wrong with Dehumanizer. And we're going to kind of go back and forth and have a fun little debate about the Dio years, because Dawn's a huge Black Sabbath fan, a huge Dio fan. So Dawn, you'll remember, was on our panel discussion for the Eternal Idol, and we're really happy to have Dawn back. And I'm looking forward to this discussion. I'm going to tell a little tiny bit of history about this album as recorded in the Born Again book that Martin wrote. I believe it's available on his website. If it's not available in a printed version, there is a PDF version that you can buy as an ebook. So just go to martinpopoff.com and you can find this. In the book, Sabbath at this point and Dio were both kind of on rocky ground a little bit with the last couple of albums that both of them had released. I mean, each of them didn't certify in the US for a few albums. They had some varying degrees of success internationally, but they were both a little bit on rocky ground at this point in around like 1990. You know, obviously Dio and Black Sabbath had the history with Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, which came out after Ozzy had left or had been kicked out of the band. They put those two albums out. Both were very successful. Heaven and Hell was certified platinum. Mob Rules was certified gold. And I believe that was the last US certified album by Black Sabbath. At least up until this point here. And I think up until 13, actually. But so at this point, there was a bit of a reunion at a Dio show in 1990 where Geezer actually came up on stage and did some songs with Dio. That was the catalyst for the former members to start talking, and it kind of became the catalyst for them to kind of do a reunion with Dio and record this album, Dehumanizer. That was in 1990. Cozy Powell was injured, so Vinny slid right back into the drums, so effectively creating a reunion of the Mob Rules era. Dehumanizer has the song itself, or the album title itself, has its roots in the song Computer God. So according to Geezer, Dehumanizer name came from the song Computer God, and basically the concept of the album was kind of like God was kind of being taken over by a computer and humans were being turned into living computers, and computers were kind of taking over humans' lives at that point. There was an effort by the band, by Tony and Geezer, to kind of move Dio lyrically away from the dragons and kings kind of themes that he was typically doing, something a little more real and a little more current. And computers are really starting to take over in like the late 80s and like early 90s. So you kind of have like a modern theme going on with this album, and which I think still holds up today. I mean, like now with everybody with phones and computers and stuff, like lyrically and idea-wise is pretty modern still. Vinny talks about how Mac, the producer, was getting some really expensive overhead mics, and that's how the album got its really bright and punchy sound. Although Geezer was not happy with his bass sound on the album, he mentioned in Martin's book that he spent hours and hours usually honing his bass sounds for the albums that he worked on. But in this case, for whatever reason, he just let Mac take over and create the bass sounds that Mac wanted. And Geezer, in hindsight, isn't happy with the way his bass sounds, although I like his bass sounds on this, and I'll point to some of the songs that I like. This album did not certify. Everybody knows that some drama kind of reared its ugly head again. After this album came out, I think there was some hopes that they would tour and really push this album, but then some drama happened when I think Tony and the guys started looking more at like kind of like an ill-fated Ozzy reunion and kind of started focusing on that a bit. The tour kind of fell apart. They didn't really push the album as much as they wanted to, and the whole reunion was kind of scrapped. And then they didn't even end up reuniting with Ozzy until later. So unfortunately, this was kind of the end of the Dio years up until the later 2000s when Dio came back and did Heaven and Hell. Dio calls this album one of the best Sabbath sounding albums, period. Although that's obviously it's a little biased because he did the 3 albums with them, not including the Heaven and Hell. The Devil You Know. I'm not going to suggest that this is better than Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. I purchased all 3 CDs at the same time, years and years and years ago, probably back when I was in high school. At the time, I listened to Heaven and Hell Mob Rules and kind of ignored Dehumanizer for the most part. I listened to those 2 albums the most, like frequently, both of them. And I do love both of those albums. I love Dio. I love Sabbath. I love Dio with Sabbath. I saw Dio with when they did the Heaven and Hell tour. I saw them twice in 2006 and 2007. I'm a big fan of Dio solo. I'm a big fan of Black Sabbath without Dio and with Dio. I really like Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. For some reason, I kind of ignored this album when I first bought it. But in the last like 10 years, I find that I've been picking this one up more often than the other 2, partially because probably I listened to those other 2 so much that this one sounds a little fresher to me. I love the concept of the album. All of it thematically fits together. I think all the songs are pretty cohesive with that concept. They all kind of flow with the same idea, which is pretty cool. It's basically a concept album. I do like the production of the album. I agree with Vinny that it is pretty bright and punchy. I think a little brighter than Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules in terms of production. I think that the instruments are all mixed very well. The drums stand out when they're supposed to. Geezer's bass stands out when it's supposed to. Tony's playing, I think, is more inspired than maybe the last couple albums that Sabbath had done up to this point. This is probably one of the heaviest Black Sabbath albums, I think. It's very sludgy, very doomy, very gloomy. And I think at a time when you had the big 4, Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer, Anthrax, you had all 4 of those bands in full swing at this time with the whole thrash thing. I love how Black Sabbath came out and kind of did something modern sounding, well produced, classic to Black Sabbath, and not maybe following the thrash trail. Like you look at a band, like of course everybody knows I'm a big Kiss fan. In the 80s, Kiss, became followers and they followed the hair metal trend and all of that stuff. I feel like Sabbath kind of was still carving their own little space with this album. It is a bit of a slower pace. There's a couple of upper tempo songs on this, but for the most part, they're pretty sludgy and pretty heavy, which is a little bit of an antithesis compared to like Rust in Peace was very thrash and very up tempo. And that came out in 1990. This came out just within a couple of years, and they're kind of doing their own thing, which is cool. They weren't following the trends. I pretty much like all the songs on this. From an album start to finish, I think some of it gets a little redundant. I really like Computer God. To me, that's the Heaven and Hell off of this album. It's very heavy. After All, I think, is one of the more doomy and haunting songs that Sabbath had done, especially for a while. A very modern sounding Sabbath song. TV Crimes, probably one of the best songs on the album. Very up tempo, very like heavy. I love all of the performances. Dio's vocals are amazing on this. I love when they double up Dio's vocals on some of the songs, like on TV Crimes or Letters from Earth. I like some of those production type things. Tony's playing on this, super heavy, super grungy sounding guitar licks. I like the drums. They sound a little dry, but I kind of like that on this. I know in Martin's book, he comments that they sound a little cardboardy or mid-rangey, but I like the drums on this. They're pretty loud. TV Crimes, if you listen to the bridge, the guitar playing and the bridge between the chorus and the solo, that's super classic Sabbath sounding. The solo is very classic Sabbath-esque. So they're still doing things that are very in the mold of Black Sabbath. And I'm talking about even like Ozzy classic Sabbath. Letters from Earth is cool. It's very classic gloomy metal riff, inspired by Tony. If you listen to the opening riff, that sounds very classic Sabbath to me. So there's things when I go back and the more I listen to this album, the more I hear things that are classic Sabbath sounding to me. And Geezer's bass. He doesn't like the sound of his bass on this album, but I find his bass to be very crunchy, especially if you listen to the opening of Master of Insanity. I think there is probably as cool as bass playing on the whole album. It's just, I think, is a great album. And again, it's subjective to say I like all the songs. I pretty much do. I think Sins of the Father is the only one where if you listen to the album start to finish, that's where kind of the album starts to get a little redundant, but then it picks up again. Too Late is incredible and heavy. I is one of the most underrated Black Sabbath Dio songs, I think. Buried Alive is super sludgy and goes with that whole kind of like slower tempo doom kind of thing. So for me, it's a very heavy, slower kind of thrash album, I guess, but in the Sabbath style. And I go to it more often than the first two. I don't know if you have any thoughts of anything I said or what you think of the album.
Well, I think what you said about the theme of some of the songs on the album, relating to how technology and the computer age affects human existence, it was actually pretty prophetic for the time. That was 1992. That was before Windows 95, which was pretty much the gateway to the average non-techie into a home computer. I mean, who had you? How old were you in 1995? One? I don't know. You're pretty young. So,
Seven.
so exactly. But so you grew up with computers. People of my generation didn't. So I remember my first it was an IBM called an Aptiva, which I called a Craptiva. I think it had like a one, not even I don't even know what the hard drive was on it, but it had Windows 95. So I think Dio was pretty smart to see how technology was just starting to be so invasive in our lives and detrimental to it in many ways, with some of those songs like Computer God. And even now, television has been around a long time, but with TV crimes, how these hypocrites, televangelists, whatnot, could actually get on TV and get into your home, um, and into your mind and commit well, I wouldn't say crimes, but immoral acts through the television, another part of technology. So I think it's still relevant today, and of course, technology is more invasive in our lives. So yeah, I think it was a good step away from the old style of writing. People make fun of him about his demons and wizards. I've never minded that. I've always thought it's just universal themes. You can find those in great works of literature, but I think it was an attempt to be more modern. I think the sound was an attempt to be more modern. I'm giving this album a 5 out of 10, which is I always say it's a poor album with some great songs. So I hate 5 of them. I'd throw them in the trash can. The other 5 I would like to keep forever. They're great songs. I could tell you the ones that I hate first, and I could tell you the good ones. Some of the good ones are probably some of your favorites. I wore my a Megadeth shirt of mine today because, like you said, people always say, "Oh, this is the heaviest Black Sabbath album of all time." I don't know about that. And I never say nice things about Ozzy, but I like the Ozzy Black Sabbath, the first stint, from beginning till when he left. I like those albums, almost every single one of them. But some of those albums are just as heavy. There's songs on some of those albums that are just as heavy as some of the songs on Dehumanizer. I would even say Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, the title track. If you listen to that song, there are parts on that where it goes out of the regular song, and then has like a little rhythm, a break in it where it goes dun, 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 dun. That's like a thrash rhythm. And what year was that? So you could say that's kind of a precursor to thrash, and well before anyone was thinking about making thrash. And then the other people, friends of mine, who always talk about this album so heavy, it's such a beast. I'm not. I guess I am being mean, but look at what else was out in 1992. Like you said, Rust in Peace. I mean, it's a different genre, but that is so heavy. And I don't really like Slayer or I hate Anthrax. But just look at Megadeth, what Megadeth and Metallica were doing prior to this. Heavy, different genre, faster, more articulate, but heavy. But if you want to talk about heavy and evil, I remember I was 20 when this album came out, and the death metal scene had already broke, like out of Florida and Scandinavia. Those bands scared me. I was an adult. I would have to go sometimes to these death metal shows locally, And I would be frightened inside of the show, not from the fans, but it's just so menacing and creepy and evil. And that's heavy. I mean, too heavy for a normal person to like, I think. So they weren't really that heavy. If you look at their past catalog, like I said, there's some really heavy parts during the Ozzy time. And then if you look at the rest of the world, a lot of stuff much heavier than this Black Sabbath album. But some of the songs on here, they are heavy. They're crunchy, dark, menacing, and I like them. And then some of the songs are poppy and well, actually, there is one song that I like that's a little poppy, a little upbeat, Master of Insanity. You probably think I'd make fun of that. I like that song, even though it's on the upside. And I think I like it because I think they stole the song from two other songs. So there's like this familiarity. They definitely stole Trampled Underfoot by Led Zeppelin, that part that goes, dun, 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 dun. That's the catch. That's the hook in that song, and that's Led Zeppelin. I guess Led Zeppelin didn't sue them because they're notorious for stealing anyway. They probably didn't want to draw any attention to themselves. And then there's the other part, the peppy part, where it's like the guitar's going. Anyway, I don't want to do it.
It's a little melodic.
Yes,
and
I swear I think they might have stole that from one of the poppier Megadeth song. It goes on and on in my head, and I'm like, what is that? I've heard it, and I can't name it. But at the end of the riff, the notes go, da na 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 na. It's like, da 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 da. It does that like 4 times, and then da na 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 na. I know I've heard it. So if there's any of your listeners who have heard that and you know what it is, please tell Marco in the comments, because it drives me crazy. So I always say I love that song because it's been stolen from 2 other songs and it's performed well. What you said about Geezer's bass, I kind of agree with Geezer. I don't like the sound of the bass either on some of the songs. I like the way they let him come in, like on Computer God, they let him come just out of the blue. He drops in and goes, like he gets these cool little parts where he comes in. Sounds pretty good. But on some of the other songs, it's real murky. And he's a good player. He doesn't play with a pick, I don't believe. He's not like, say, Ellefson, who's, articulating every note perfectly and clear. So you kind of expect a little bit of mud, although some people who play with their fingers they're perfect. I mean, and it sounds like they've got little metal picks on their fingers, but not him. And so I don't think he got the best bass sound. Vinny's drumming, people complain about that all the time. I don't have a problem with it, but I think something's wrong with the cymbals or his hi-hat. Especially, I noticed it the most on Computer God. I swear it sounds like someone has heated the cymbal up to about 400 degrees and he drops a piece of bacon on it, because it's really sizzly sounding, too sizzly, to the point where it detracts from the song. It's like, what is that? You're paying attention to something that shouldn't be there. So, but like you said, that's probably the masterpiece. The 5 songs I like: Computer God, Letters from Earth, Master of Insanity, and Too Late. All great songs. The rest of them, But I think a lot of the problems, even on the songs I do like, Tony Iommi's leads are disappointing on a lot of them, like on one song in particular. It sounds like I'm going to rehash a Neon Nights. I'm going to rehash the Neon Nights solo, but not as good. And then on Computer God, he drops in on his first lead and he's trying to shred. He can't shred. So why embarrass yourself? You're not Dave Mustaine, or, you're not a shredder. And it clashes so bad that it just drops into the song out of nowhere. And it's like, what are you doing? It doesn't sound good. But there is one song where I think his lead is really good. And I think, he's not an idiot. He's paying attention to what these upstart thrash bands are doing. And he's got this one lead where I swear it sounds like he's trying to emulate a Dave Mustaine lead, but he realizes I've got my limitations. I can't play that fast. So I'm going to play it a little slower, but it's still going to sound great. And it does. And then at the end of that lead, he drops in with dives like Eddie Van Halen. So, he's not living in a bubble. He knows what these other guys are doing. He knows maybe I can't do that, but I can incorporate a little. And when he does that, he's great. But when he just tries things that he can't do, the sake of, a certain number of notes per minute, it's a disaster, a total mess. I think Dio's vocals are good throughout most of the album, although he gets a little too melodramatic and poppy on all the songs I hate. He gets a little too melodramatic and poppy. And I think his lyrics on TV Crimes in particular, when he comes at the chorus where he's got that nursery rhyme stuff going on, that's just lazy writing, and he can write better than that. So I don't really like that. I think it's one of the last songs. It's really chunky and it's really heavy, but it's almost like they said, it's just for the sake of the chunk and the heaviness. It's not really a good song. So that's why I can't give it a high rating. I really don't need 5 of those songs. I think they're awful. I don't like After All the Dead. That one has the most bizarre thing. It starts out so good. I'm really rooting for it because it sounds like old Black Sabbath from like the Black Sabbath. Tony Iommi, it's all evil sound, and he's doing the hammer-ons and pull-offs, and it's the menacing old Sabbath sound. You're thinking this is going to be great, and then all of a sudden, sounds like, did this song come off the soundtrack for Queen of the Damned? It's all trendy sounding, and then the song takes a bad turn into this key change that sounds like something off Queen from We Are the Champions, one of those bizarre keys that they play in. It's just a mess. I hate that song. Then I already told you why I hate TV Crimes. And surprisingly, for such a peppy, fast song, it's boring. And most of the time, a fast song isn't boring. That song's boring. If it would have been on Lock Up the Wolves, say, it would have fit in better, but I still would have hated it. Then Time Machine, they ruined the song, but I could have really liked it because when it starts, it doesn't sound like Black Sabbath. It has this voivod vibe, like this weird voivod sound with a Judas Priest just like moving forward, a Judas Priest crunching rhythm like a Judas Priest from the 80s. And so I think, oh, great, this is going to be good. But everything else about the song, awful. Every single thing. So it even ruins that for me. And then I already told you Buried Alive is the one that I hate. It's just like, let's try to be as chunky as we can. No point. Sins of the Father. This is an interesting song. And a lot of people talk about this, my friends at least, the way it starts out. Like the first half of the song has that droning thing where people say, oh, that's Dio proving he can sing like Ozzy. And then he stomps all over him when it gets hard because Ozzy can't sing like Dio. I don't really think he's trying to sing like Ozzy. It sounds like the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Band in the beginning to me. That droning, like from Strawberry Fields Forever, that song, it's got that real old Beatles sound, not like Ozzy. I don't think Dio would have been petty enough to say, I'm going to imitate Ozzy and then I'm going to, stomp him into the ground. I don't think he would have done that. And a lot of the guitar it's like, I realize they're trying to have a futuristic modern sound, but if you've noticed some of the way, I don't know if it's an effect, a lot of times the guitar, it sounds like a pinball machine or something. Have you ever listened to it again? You'll hear these weird little sounds but it's the guitar trying to sound like a pinball machine. I don't get it. I just can't give it a high rating because I can't find more than 5 songs that I enjoy listening to. I don't think it's, being heavy just for the sake of being heavy doesn't mean anything really. And Dio's vocals are good. I love I think that's the best song, like I told you. I think that I like the way and even though he does talk about things that are related to technology, he's still digging into the well of, his views about the hypocrisy of religion, Christianity in particular. So a lot of the songs deal with that. he talks, like on Letters to Earth. That's not about the hypocrisy of religion, but it's like as though you're writing letters from Earth, like you're on Earth looking at the suffering and pain and what humanity does to itself, and you're writing a letter, presumably to some god. And with Dio, that would have been, the Christian God, I assume. So he focuses on that a lot too, and I don't mind. I don't mind social commentary, religious commentary. It's all interesting to me. Just 5 out of 5, Marco. That's all I can give it.
Yeah, I'm surprised there's some of those songs that you don't like. Like After All is one of my favorites. TV Crimes is one of my favorites. Like those are a couple of, and like I said, Buried Alive. Sins of the Father, Martin in his book actually said was the most underrated song on the album. So, but that one for me was a little more redundant. Like I said, starts to sound a little redundant by that point, but I like the songs after it. Time Machine was another one that for me is kind of like that. Those two songs are maybe my weakest of the whole album, but I'm surprised. And I feel exactly the same way about After All. There's parts of it that remind me of Master of Reality, kind of. And then there's parts of it that almost foreshadow 13. It's almost like a weird bridge between the old and the later, to me. That's one that I've actually pointed to some of my friends who don't like Dio Sabbath. Actually, I have one friend who only listens to the Ozzy era. That's one song I pointed to him saying, like, if you want to check out like a Dio sounding song that's kind of reminiscent of the old stuff, like that, After All is one of the ones that I recommended to him. Just to go through some of the research that I did. So I looked at some rankings lists and I did a little bit of research. Like I said, this album did not certify. Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules both certified, one platinum, the other one gold. Sea of Tranquility ranked all the Black Sabbath albums. Sea of Tranquility, so Pete Pardo. He had Dehumanizer come in right in about the middle of the pack. He had Dehumanizer at 13. He did suggest that it was one of the heaviest Sabbath albums. And he did suggest that he could actually even rearrange it with a few of the albums that came after. So even though he ranked it at 13, he could probably switch it up with maybe his number 12, 11, or 10. He had both Mob Rules and Heaven and Hell rank higher than it. Ultimate Classic Rock ranked the Sabbath albums. It had Dehumanizer come in at 16. The Devil You Know was actually ranked in this list as well and came in at 13. Mob Rules came in at 8, Heaven and Hell at 5, and number 1 was Paranoid on that list. So one quote from them is, Heaven and Hell managed. Yeah, you're shaking your head, but in all my research,
Paranoid.
All my research, every rankings list that I looked at, Paranoid was number 1, and I'll go through each one. So Ultimate Classic Rock, the quote from them is, Heaven and Hell managed the rare feat of remaining true to the group's fundamental metal sound while simultaneously applying a much needed modernizing sheen to the proceedings. So that's what they said about the album Heaven and Hell, which they ranked as their highest of the Dio years, and Paranoid being their highest of all Black Sabbath. Loudwire had Dehumanizer at 10, Mob Rules at 8, Heaven and Hell at 5, and 1 was Paranoid. The return of Ronnie James Dio brought Sabbath to the closest to its roots since the singer's initial stint with Black Sabbath. So they're talking about Dehumanizer here. Dehumanizer is a plodding, gritty record, mostly bereft of up-tempo songs, save for TV Crimes and Time Machine. I think there's a couple other ones that are a little more up-tempo. I don't think it's just the two, but abrasive riffing dominates songs like The Start and Stop of Computer God, After All, and Letters from Earth. The menacing Eye finds a balance between both styles with Dio's self-empowering lyrics delivered with unbridled conviction. Kerrang had Mob Rules at 12, Dehumanizer at 8, Heaven and Hell at number 4 in their list of Black Sabbath albums. And again, number 1 was Paranoid. The rise of grunge actually gave Sabbath a bit of a boost in the early 90s. Thus, this return of Ronnie James Dio, Geezer Butler, and Vinny Appice for the first time since Mob Rules became Sabbath's biggest album in a decade. But it was more than nostalgia. After the mystics and theatrics of the 80s, this was a more raw, in-a-room outing where the heaviness of I and Computer God could properly breathe and rumble. Dio's voice, meanwhile, positively shines, really showing off what a Herculean set of lungs he had. Nowhere more so than on After All the Dead, one of the most doomed songs in the Sabbath canon. It would be an all too brief reunion, however, with Dio departing again soon after, but still a hell of a way to stoke the fires. Louder Sound had Dehumanizer at 14. They listed The Devil You Know at 12, Mob Rules at 8, Heaven and Hell at 3, and Paranoid number 1. So again, Heaven and Hell is the number 1 ranked album of the Dio years. So this is why I'm contrarian. If Dehumanizer wasn't quite the glorious comeback fans had hoped for, some of the old magic was evident on Time Machine and The Haunting Eye. Dehumanizer wasn't quite the glorious comeback. Sorry. Best ever albums had Paranoid at number 1, Heaven and Hell at 6, Mob Rules at 8, and Dehumanizer at 14. So again, you're seeing Dehumanizer come in near the bottom of the middle of the pack, Heaven and Hell being ranked number 1 of the Dio years, and Paranoid being ranked number 1 of all Black Sabbath. All Music rated Dehumanizer 2.5 stars. Heaven and Hell got 4.5, and Mob Rules got 4 stars. The All Music fan rating is 4.5 stars. Bradley Torreno says Ronnie James Dio singer delivers his strongest performance since the early 80s, and hearing Geezer Butler and Tony Iommi play together after 9 years is inspiring, but they cannot seem to overcome the challenge of crafting classic Sabbath material. And this is the issue that haunts the recording from moment 1. So he goes on to comment on each of the songs. Dehumanizer isn't terrible, but it should have been a sign for the band to call it a career. Instead, Dio split when he refused to open shows for Ozzy's retirement tour. They used Judas Priest singer Rob Halford for a few shows, and then everyone left but Tony and Butler. One of the fan reviews, so this is Sellers Bergener, he says the album is an absolute classic. We often hear people talk of music having aged well, whatever that means. We know when we hear it, music that seems to get better with time. Dehumanizer is that album for Black Sabbath. With the exception of the album's cover, Dehumanizer suffers very little from the old heavy metal cheesy elements and delivers a very hard, very straight-faced performance. He goes on to praise a lot of the music on the album and the songs. Just one more list. Rolling Stones album guide had Black Sabbath and Paranoid each with 5 stars. Gave Heaven and Hell 4 stars, Mob Rules 3 stars, and Dehumanizer 2 stars. And they said, buyer beware of the post-Ozzy albums, and a good many of them should have been sold under the name The Tony Iommi Experience. There are 3 essential purchases: Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules, and Born Again. As for all my research, I'm pretty contrarian on my pick. I don't know if you have any other thoughts regarding my pick or any of the research I did.
Well, I can understand and respect why you like Dehumanizer so much. I guess I would rank the Dio Sabbath albums in the order that they came out. 1, 2, 3, 4, with a huge drop off after the first 2. I'm not going to talk about Live Evil, like the studio ones. Heaven and Hell, I always list as my favorite with Dio, but we're talking about 10 out of 10, except for I don't like Lady Evil. I just can't. That song is, honestly, because I like every song on Mob Rules, but I don't care for Lady Evil. Yet there's something sentimental to me about the Heaven and Hell. So I always say Heaven and Hell slightly above Mob Rules, but I like every song on Mob Rules. And then Dehumanizer, if you're falling off a cliff, I'm liking 5 songs. I guess by these new modern ratings, I would give it a 2.5 out of 5, because I noticed you were reading a lot of, that's what you're talking about, something out of 5, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't rate
2
them.
stars,
well,
4 stars.
I guess I'm stuck on the metric. I'm going 5 out of 10. And so it's a half of a good album. That's not a good album. But my favorite 2 songs are I and Too Late. That song, Too Late, that's another masterpiece that I didn't mention, but it's kind of formulaic, where it starts off really slow in a good way. And, then the hammer drops and Dio comes in. Great vocals throughout. And they're letting him sing about that stuff that he used to like to sing about, like the occult, where he's talking about, oh no, it's too late. Like if you mess around with the occult, I really like, it's kind of, when he says, you're in the little chorus parts, he's saying, oh, but I was just joking. You got to let me go. And then the demon actually says, no. That's a cool song. And all these guys, Richie Blackmore, Dio, all of them, they have all these stories, which I've read in some of Martin's books, where I don't believe in any of that stuff. I mean, I could sleep on top of a Ouija board at night, with a candle lit and a bat hanging off my head. No demons are going to get me. I just don't believe in that stuff. But I know people who do. And it cracks me up. They're always like, Dio, he knew what he was talking about. So it's kind of funny to me, but I love that song. And I think you can tell how he feels about dabbling in the occult. And you can tell that he feels genuinely that you should not. So I think that's a great song. I don't pay much attention to how many albums sold. I noticed a lot and I guess it's your job. You have to know how many albums sold. I don't care if it sold one. If I like it and I'm the one that bought it, it's a great album. I've always felt that way, but I know these people have to make money. So I guess it's important in that respect to them that they sell a lot of albums. And I don't ever pay attention to what the ratings are, because look at all these ratings. People putting Paranoid #1, they're insane. I would, if I was making like a top 10 Black Sabbath albums, if Dehumanizer made it in there, it would be at the bottom of the top, as there are so many good Ozzy era ones that have to come in. But definitely Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules would be off the charts in the top 10 for me.
Yeah. And like I said, like I don't disagree that those albums are classic Black Sabbath, classic Dio Black Sabbath albums. I guess I'm suffering a little bit from the fact that I listen to them so much. And that's probably goes more in your favor of one of your points. Like I listen to those albums so much that now I'm more of a Dehumanizer guy, because I've listened to them. So, and there's still, I could listen to Neon Nights every day, I think. Die Young, incredible song. Those are incredible tunes. The Mob Rules, the title track, like amazing tunes. Just for me, the last 10 years, I've been going more for Dehumanizer. I've just been reaching. And when I first heard it, I ignored it. And then now it's the go-to Black Sabbath Dio album that I listen to. Same with Dio's discography in general, like Lock Up the Wolves, Strange Highways. I'm starting to find more on those albums, going back to more of those ones than some of the early ones that I listened to so much. So
I know something. When you were telling the history at the beginning, you were talking about Cozy Powell's involvement in pre-production.
This horse accident.
Yeah. Well, what would have been really cool? Cozy Powell is a great drummer. Everybody says so. I'm not a drummer, so I wouldn't know, but he sounds good. And they could have called the band Black Rainbow.
Yes. Yeah.
And that would have been, Rainbow. Yeah, exactly. If they called that band Black Rainbow, Richie would have probably tried to sue him because he's a jerk. But Ozzy couldn't, what could Ozzy complain about? They're not traveling under the name Black Sabbath, and it would have been Black Rainbow. And I bet you the album would have not been quite as sludgy with Cozy Powell on the drums. I don't know how it works. Do they go in there and say, make up a drum part to this? Or do they say, play this? I don't know how they do it, but I think he plays, it just seems a little lighter than Vinny. Vinny seems like, he's got tree trunks beating on the drums and kind of a little slower kind of, but that's probably because that's how the songs he's got to play. That's what the song is. So you can't play fast if it's not a fast song, and you can't play light and airy if it's not a light and airy song. So when people talk about him being a plotter, I think they're criticizing him unrightly, because you can't have your drum part clash with the rest of the song. It's all gotta fit. I did want to say one more thing. Even the songs I love, like I said, I love Too Late. Even this, I love that song, but Tony Iommi on his guitar lead, it starts out, he's got two leads kind of towards the middle of the song. And I don't know what that man, is he deaf? But he comes in with this high pitched, like so loud, almost off key. And I'm sitting here thinking, did you take a kazoo and, take all the bass out of a kazoo and then electrify it and hook it up to an overdrive pedal? Because it doesn't even sound like a guitar. It sounds awful, but the rest of the solo isn't bad. And then I was thinking about it before this, and I've heard it before. It actually sounds like a slide whistle. And if you've never heard a slide whistle, listen to the Bob Dylan song Highway 61 Revisited. It starts off with an annoying, obnoxious slide whistle. And so it's like Iommi always just does these little things that just nothing can ever be totally perfect on certain, because he's crazy or something, or maybe he's deaf, or he doesn't have people around him to say, hey, that sounds horrible, get rid of that. And since he's kind of the boss, he and Geezer, correct? Aren't they pretty much the bosses of of Black Sabbath? Unless, well, I don't know. I guess it depends on which album, but no one's going to tell him how awful something sounds. Mm-hmm. And that is to his detriment. I would, if I was in that room, I'd laugh him out of there. I'd say, that sounds horrible. You go back to the drawing board. You can do better, And then he probably knocked my teeth down my throat.
I love Letters from Earth. And there's some guitar sound effects on that song that kind of sound almost like banshees howling or demons howling or something. But that song, to go back, just reminds me, that song is one of my favorites off the album. And there's something that really cool that happens in that album or that song where it almost turns into kind of like a jam session. It turns into like this really chugging kind of jam session with a lot of energy. And I can't imagine, like I imagine how much energy must have been popping out of those rehearsals when they were writing these songs, because like that song just totally goes into like this cool, really energy laden like jam session that I really like on that tune. And one of the highlights of the album for me is that part in Letters from Earth. But there's some sound effects on that song that's kind of.
I agree. I love that solo. That's the solo I was talking about, where I can hear it's bluesy. He's not, just a flurry of meaningless notes. It's bluesy. He does some like Eddie Van Halen dives, but which just seem uncharacteristic for him, but he can do them and it sounds great in that solo. That's the thing about him. If you go back to the Ozzy era, a song like Dirty Women, I love that song. You're sitting there listening to it. And when that solo comes in, you literally go and you look at, if you're driving, you look at the CD player or whatever, and you're like, oh my God, is that Tony Iommi, a really cool Southern rock guitar player who can play 10 times better than Tony Iommi? And you're like, if you can play all the, why can't you, get that type of inspiration on all, take your time, make great solos. But that's another one where when I listen to that song and he starts playing that solo, I do that double take. Is that Tony Iommi? And plus the rhythm guitar for that really reminds me of a mechanical spider. If you listen to it again and see if you can't imagine in your head a mechanical spider, kind of like Dave Mustaine playing the intro for Skull Beneath the Skin on Killing Is My Business. He starts playing it. It's like, it sounds like a mechanical spider. And then Dave speeds it up until he gets it into this crazy, a crazy slick cyclical sound. Tony can't play that fast, articulate, in an articulate manner. So he keeps it at a good pace that he can play, but you still get that effect of like a mechanical, creepy spider. Sometimes when I listen to music and I close my eyes, I imagine, things that might seem a bit unconventional, but listen to it and think of a mechanical spider.
Cool. I will. I'll check it out. All right. Thanks. I think that's pretty much, we've each said what we wanted to say. If anybody has any comments for the comment section, let us know. Do you agree, disagree? Is Dehumanizer kind of your more go-to album of the Dio years lately, or are you still championing Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules? If you want to join us over at Patreon, we have a Patreon channel. We got lots of exclusive videos there, and you can join our panel discussions at any tier. We also have t-shirts. I'm repping one tonight, and you can get those on TeePublic, link in the description. And go ahead.
I would like to, may I say something about the Patreon community? Okay. I watched your channel for a long time and I didn't join at first. And then I thought, well, why not? Just to see what it was like. And I've got to tell you, and everyone who's listening, I'm not a Patreon, to any other channel, but it's it's like being in a gang, except for you're not prowling the streets and beating up old ladies. You're sitting around talking about music with other people who are nice, polite, and just from a wide range of backgrounds. But it makes you feel like, I don't want to say you're in a community, because I don't feel like I'm in a community. I feel like I'm in a gang, like a secret gang. And I like it. And everyone's polite. I'm the worst one. I'm the rudest person. So, if you really, I am. So if you could put up with someone like me, you should join, because it's very inexpensive and you can help shape the channel. You get to put forth ideas and vote in polls. It's fun. So try it for 1 month, and see how you like it. If you don't mind me saying, because I don't think you promote it. I mean, I know you don't want to be like cheesy the crazy promoter. I'll do that. I don't mind. I'm crass. I'm American. But you've really got to try it. I enjoy it very much. And so do all the other guys. All the other guys love it.
Yeah,
even if you're not an English speaker, you kind of got to be able to speak English if you want to do videos, because I don't think most of us speak many other foreign languages, right?
We have some folks from like Germany and like I think like some of the Nordic countries and Australia, New Zealand. Like we have folks from, it's international. We have folks from all around the world for sure.
I'd like some South Americans. They still have a very thriving metal scene down there, and a lot of the guys are into progressive and alternative things that I don't really like. But if we could get some South Americans, because they're really, they're ardent, fiery metal fans. So if any, and you can speak Spanish as your native tongue, but you probably speak English. Actually, most English speakers are the ones that are lacking in being, bilingual. So that would be nice.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. That was amazing. Just to promote it a bit more, we do, not only do we do panel discussions and stuff, we do trivia nights with prizes. We do a Q&A every month where you can ask Martin Popoff a question and he answers everybody's questions. And that's an exclusive video that we put up once a month. We do polls like Don had mentioned. What else? We do all kinds of stuff on there.
You give us free things like little ebooks, you email them to us, little audio books. And with that, you don't have to just like metal. You could like Iggy Pop. You could like the MC5, Badlands. There's a wide variety that I've gotten and enjoyed. And I don't even really care about them. It's just a bonus. I like being able to vote in the polls and put forth poll ideas. And then, it helps narrow it down to what are the next panel discussions going to be. It's fun. It's fun and it's cheap. I mean, for the price of a Frappuccino, you've got a month-long membership in a gang. It's kind of, I know it's not a real gang, but I kind of like that. It's like a gang. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much, Don. I appreciate that a lot. It's amazing. And if anybody wants to join us over Patreon, and I guess other than that, we'll agree to disagree, and we'll see y'all next time.
That's it, dude.